Okay, well, good evening, vinyl community. It's January. That means it's time for another vinyl tag. I'm just going to get started. I'm going to skip to number two first. Last band or solo artist you saw live. The Smile, spin off project from two members of Radiohead. Last concert I saw, possibly my favorite album of the year. But question number one, favorite release, new release of 2022. Don't want to use The Smile twice. Not sure if it was really my favorite. So my other possible favorite, Dropout Boogie by the Black Keys. Call me a dork, but I like me some Black Keys, and I absolutely love their new album. Their first album was the best. First album by the Pretenders. My copy that I've had ever since I was in high school. Love it. Quick note, this isn't like a first pressing or anything, but if you do get an original, this is an insert that you should see in vintage copies. Keep your eye open for that insert. You know that you got a pretty old copy. I just want to say it's not like it's their best album. Definitely the first one is their best, but the Pretenders aren't a band that came out with a bang and then went downhill, just got worse and worse with each album. That would be Van Halen. Unbelievable first album. They got worse with every subsequent album. The worse they got, the more records they sold. Van Halen. Okay, Hat Trick. Show, vinyl, CD, cassette, or album. I have absolutely no idea what this question is asking, so I'm just going to show you an album. It's one I bought in 22. It's a reissue of River Deep, Mountain High by Ike and Tina Turner. It is just a gorgeous Phil Spector mind blower. Album and starts and ends with the same letter. I am going with Armchair Apocrypha, which I'm probably not pronouncing right, by Andrew Bird. Love me some Andrew Bird. He's great. Born in the same year as you. Well, folks, I don't have an almanac with me that tells me the birth date of all the musicians I listen to. I have no idea what year people were born. So I'm just going to show some albums from 1967 and say that these albums were born in 1967. We got Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme by Simon and Garfunkel, a good example of 1967. It really captures the spirit of the times, as well as Pepper or Piper or Disraeli Gears or any of those other classics from 67. And I'll also throw in the Free Design, Kites Are Fun, which is sort of what dorky people were doing in 1967. But it's a fun album. Next question. Most listened to album of 2022. There are a lot of albums that I listened to a bit, but I'd have to say probably in November, I just listened to this album, and I just listened to it several times in the last couple of months, and it got me going on a Depeche Mode kick. I've been listening to a lot of their stuff and some older albums that I'd never even heard before. So what got it started was I listened to this sucker over and over for about a month. Playing the Angel, I think it's from 2005. Love it, love it, love it. I'd heard it a number of times, but for some reason it just really clicked. And to prove how much I fell in love with it, Depeche Mode did a project this year where they released all their remixes, and they do. Depeche Mode's always done like a lot of remix versions of their songs and everything. So I got this monster box set of remixes and alternate takes and stuff from Playing the Angel. So I think that is the album that I probably listened to the most in 2022. Australian band or artist. I'm going with Diesel and Dust by the band Midnight Oil. Don't really know much about them. It's the only album I have by Midnight Oil, but it kicks ass. An Australian band. Artist that you listen to the most in 2022. I'm not really sure who I listen to the most, but this is an artist that I've been listening to more and more lately, and the more I listen to him, I think the better he gets. I just really, in the last year or two, have grown to just think this guy is just amazing. And I'm talking about Joe Walsh. So There Goes the Neighborhood. But seriously, folks, by Joe Walsh, real quick, this one is kind of hard to find. I don't see this one around very much. I remember when this one came out. I think this is a really underrated album that I don't see around very much. So if you see this one in the wild, snag it. It's a fantastic album by Joe Walsh. Biggest surprise of 2022. I bought this at a garage sale for $1. Didn't expect much from it. Was blown away. It is Wild Tales by Graham Nash. Surprise, surprise. That was a wonderful album. Something that you're a completist on. That would be Echo and the Bunnymen. I love me some Echo and the Bunnymen. Gotta love Echo and Bunnymen. This is my original copy. I bought it when I was in high school. Love it, love it, love it. I am a completist up until I think they kind of fell off at the kind of end there. And I think this is the last truly great album that they did, in my opinion. I got a vinyl release, I think, in 2021. So I'm pretty much a completist up until this point. And they also just got, Evergreen just finally got a vinyl reissue in 2022. Hugely underrated album, in my opinion. A great 3 run of albums. And I am going to go with the amazing, stupendous, incredible 3 record run of U2, beginning with War. The awesomeness peaks with Unforgettable Fire. Probably my favorite U2 album. That or Achtung Baby. And then Joshua Tree, the absolute monster, greatest selling album of all time, or close to being as much. And I'll throw in, for those of you who may not know this, in between Joshua Tree and Unforgettable Fire, he put out this great EP called Wide Awake in America. Some live renditions of songs off of Unforgettable Fire, and some tracks that didn't appear on Unforgettable Fire. The extra bonus tracks are as good as anything on Unforgettable Fire. This is an absolute gem. Keep your eye open for this if you've never heard it. Dynamite EP called Wide Awake in America, to add to an unbelievably mind-blowingly great run of 3 albums. 80s soundtrack. This is not an 80s soundtrack, but it sort of is. It is the soundtrack to Stranger Things, which, as we all know, is an 80s themed TV show. The soundtrack is meant to sound like 80s synth music, kind of like Tangerine Dream or something like that. Unbelievable music. It's perfect no matter what mood you're in. I always love listening to this album. Stranger Things soundtrack. We lost them in 2022. Gonna give a shout out to Christine McVie. This is the underrated album Mirage, which I absolutely love. And I think it's better than Rumors, which everyone thinks is great and I think is overrated. But that is Mirage. Rest in peace, Christine McVie. Disappointing purchase of 2022. I really hate saying this. I think this was either a 22 or a 21 record store day release. Might have been 2021. I don't recall. I just hate saying this, but a mono edition of Quiet Kenny by Kenny Dorham. I love jazz, don't get me wrong, but this album just puts me to sleep. It just doesn't do anything for me. Love me some jazz. Listened to it several times. Just some jazz sessions, I just don't think the musicians were there. They just sound like they're just going through the motions. I just could not get into that album. Sorry. Although I was really thrilled with some of the record store releases this year. I made out like a bandit, especially on Black Friday. Non-vinyl purchase. Intimations, a series of essays written by Zadie Smith, an amazing writer during the deepest, darkest days of the lockdown. Kind of reminiscent of some of Joan Didion's writings. Very thin book, easy to read, but I'm going through this right now. Intimations by Zadie Smith. You found a grail. Well, I don't know if it's a grail, but it's an album I was having a devil of a hard time finding. And it is New Generation by the Chambers Brothers. Love the Chambers Brothers. This is the only copy I've ever seen in the wild. I snagged it when I saw it. I've been looking for it for years. Their stuff has never gotten reissued. I think that a lot of their albums have never been reissued since the late 60s. So I don't know if that's really a grail or not, but it was a grail for me. I was delighted to finally find a copy. Space themed album or song. I've used this before on vinyl tags. 2001 A Space Odyssey. Y'all, I don't need to beat this to death. You know, we all know about the film. I will mention that this isn't my original. I bought a new copy. I lost track of my original years ago. But this album is one of the things that got me into classical music. And yeah, anyway, I listen to a lot of classical music. And that album is a big part of what got me into it. Shows some VCLT or present. Well, a couple of years ago, I've had a couple of friends that have gifted me vinyl because they no longer have turntables. They know I collect vinyl. A friend of mine gave me his collection, including all the albums by the Police. Excuse me, I got a cold. So I will show off Synchronicity that I got from my friend. It's my favorite Police album. I know a lot of people don't like this album. I don't care. I think it's their best album. Lastly, an album released in 1973. Well, the Graham Nash album I showed earlier was 1973, but here's another one. This is the jazz fusion drummer from Mahavishnu Orchestra, another band's Billy Cobham, Spectrum. Fantastic jazz fusion album on the mighty Atlantic label that ruled the earth in the 1970s. A stupendous example of 1973 music at its finest. So that's the vinyl tag. Happy 2023, everybody. Hope you have a good year. See you around. Take care.